Everybody, wants to say everyone deserves a second chance, and they do. But a second chance doesn't have to include you being involved in their life.
Hello, sweet friends. I'm Stephanie Jacobs, a storyteller and advocate for social justice, and your host of the Love Light Stories podcast, a place where we uncover a deeper understanding of humanity through beautiful, redemptive stories that inspire our hearts. If you long to see more love, empathy, and true connection in our world and your own life, you're in the right place. After spending multiple years studying social justice issues, I've realized the power story has in helping us to understand, empathize, and transform our worldviews into something that's just that, views that are truly worldly. Here in this space, we'll embrace our humanity through raw and authentic stories told by real people themselves. We'll amplify their voices and learn to connect in more meaningful ways. Poverty, human trafficking, incarceration, race, immigration, and more. We'll embrace difficult conversations, sometimes controversial topics, and lighthearted stories too. If you wish to uncover the hope, love, empathy, and connection we can find in our fellow humanity, this is a show for you. So, are you ready, lovely? Let's jump in. Well, hello there again, lovely. Welcome back to the Love Light Stories podcast, where we create space for real personal stories to be seen, heard, and understood. If you haven't yet, be sure to rate the show, follow, and share it with your family and friends. Today on the podcast, I'm welcoming Patricia Jones. She is a mental health therapist and has such a wealth of knowledge stemming from her own life story and experiences that I just had to have her on the show. In this episode, we're sitting down to understand Patricia's experience living as a Black woman in America. You'll also gain a new perspective as you hear her story of walking through multiple divorces due to some pretty surprising circumstances, raising Black children, enduring racial tension, and serving as a therapist in her day job. I met Patricia back in 2019 when she joined the mission trip to Haiti I was co-leading, and thank goodness she joined. Patricia is one of my favorite people, both for her lightheartedness and ability to speak the truth from deep wisdom. Much of this wisdom she's gained through her own life experiences. As she shares her story in the first half of this episode today, you'll come to understand the immense difficulty she's endured, which in large part led her to first going to therapy herself. And in the second half of this episode, and without getting too political, we get into a deep conversation around the insurrection at the Capitol and her experiences living as a Black woman in America. I think you'll find her perspective here very interesting as she vulnerably shares her lived experiences while balancing them with a therapist mindset. Don't get lost in this story. Listen until the end and you'll be glad you stuck around for such an eye-opening episode. Patricia is so wise and I just can't wait for you to meet her. Patricia, wow, it is just lovely to have you on the Love Light Stories podcast today. We have had the chance to get to know each other over the last couple of years, and I'm just so thankful that you're joining me today.
It's good. It's always good to talk to you, and it's really good. It's been too long since we've actually seen each other touch to touch.
Yes,
yes. I mean, I guess this is face to face, but it's not touch to touch. So I miss that.
Yes, I do too, for sure. You know, we went to Haiti together back in, when was it? 2019, I think. And it was a long time ago already. We went to Haiti in 2019 and we really got to know each other's stories because that was part of what we did as a team. And I just learned so much through your story and how you shared the experiences that you've walked through, the things in your life. And I just remember always feeling like you were so wise. And I know that's the case because our whole team always said it, like, Patricia, anytime we needed some wise advice or some extra thought, we're always like, Patricia, what do do you think? What do you think we should say or do or whatever? And so I think that you're just incredibly wise. And that's a really big part of why I'm really excited for people to listen to this conversation today and be able to get a glimpse of your story and the wisdom that you have to share.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so let's jump in to where your story begins and the moment. Tell us about the moment that you'd like to share with us in your marriage, like your first marriage, perhaps.
Okay, so I was married young, like most people, in my 20s, which seemed old at the time, right? I think I was like 21 or something like that. But now people are waiting much longer. But at that time, that's what you did. You got married when you were young, and as soon as you thought you were an adult. So I did. I got married, and the guy that I married he was a nice guy. We were really like best friends. We were like best buddies. We did get along. But at 20 something years old, you have all these ambitions that you want to hurry up, make a lot of money, get rich, have everything, all the nice things that life tells you that you should have. And so he did. But he decided the fastest way to make money would be to sell drugs. And he thought, I'll sell drugs, I'll make a lot of money, I'll get back with my family, and we'll just keep going. I'll stop selling drugs. But it doesn't work like that, right?
Yeah.
It never works that way. Whenever you do something that I used to always say, sin takes you further than you want to go and keeps you longer than you wanted to stay.
See, wisdom right there. Wisdom.
And so he got involved in selling drugs. And of course, that led to going to jail. Then that led to, it was just one thing after another. And so in the midst of all that, we were living in St. Louis, Missouri. He went to California to do that. And I definitely was not going to get involved. And he didn't want me to get involved, of course. So
yeah,
it did separate us. And then once he started going to jail and that kind of thing, we had to cut the marriage. But I had 2 children. And so we did not hear or see from him for years.
Oh my goodness. So how long were you still in that marriage while that was happening then?
I had to actually get a divorce by default. And I'm not sure if people know that that's possible. But I got divorced by default. I did everything on my own and got a divorce and filed the paperwork. And I did all the steps that it takes to try to find him. And at some point, he had 30 days to respond. We put it in the newspaper, all that type of thing. And so he had a certain amount of time to respond. And once he didn't respond, I was able to get divorced by default.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
So like in that moment, then did you not know where he was?
I did not know. I knew he was in California. Well, the last time I talked to him, I guess I'm just assuming, right? I don't know where he was. The last time I talked to him, he was in California.
Oh.
And his family had not heard from him. Nobody knew where he was. They would, he might pop up on, that was before social media, Instagram, that kind of stuff. So
my goodness.
I don't even think we had cell phones. So it wasn't like we could call him or anything like that.
Yeah. So what you said about sin staying longer, and I can't say it as good as you said it, but what you said really kind of transpired, because it sounds like it was this thing where he got into it wanting to make some extra money, and it snowballed. He ended up leaving, going to California, and got deeper and deeper into it to the point where he's like basically abandoned his family. And he may have felt forced to do that too. We don't know, right?
Absolutely.
He could have been in a situation where he couldn't respond to you. I don't know.
He went to jail. So we did find him. We found him maybe 13 years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, me and my friends were sitting around talking about, we saw this thing where you could pay them and they'll find people for you.
Yeah.
And we actually did it. We paid some money and they found him.
Wow.
And he was in jail. I guess that was made him easy to find, right?
Yeah.
And he was actually in jail. And I went to visit him just so we could sit down and talk about what the heck happened,
Yes.
Oh. And we did. We talked about it, and he, told me all the different adventures he had went through. But yeah, he went to jail for selling drugs, and he was still in jail when we finally found him.
Oh, that's too bad. Did he show like any remorse? Like, was he sad about it, or?
Yeah, he was sorry about it. He was sorry that it happened. And of course, like he said, he got caught up. It went too far. He had gotten shot. There's a lot that went on in his life.
Yeah, that's
so
hard.
That's not the direction that he was going in, but that's where you can end up if you have to be careful about the power of a decision.
Yes, yes, exactly. I just want to ask too, in those moments where it could be during the time when you were like trying to find him or writing up the papers, putting it in the newspaper, all of that, what was going through your mind and like how were you feeling in those moments?
But at that time, since I was really young, I was still like confused. Like, I wonder why he would leave us, and I was looking at my children, and I would see my child the first time they went to school, and when they didn't get their homework, and we're laughing and talking. And I'm thinking he's missing all of this.
Mm,
How would anybody want to miss these times?
yeah.
I'm still confused by that when I see single parents or dads that are not in the child's life. I'm thinking, but you're missing so much. You don't care. Are you sitting somewhere wondering, what my child looks like? I missed their first step. Did they laugh? Are they good in baseball? Are you missing all of it? And so I was very, very confused. And I went into a state of, kind of depression or kind of just like disillusionment. It would probably be a better word.
Hmm.
Because I kept going, kept laughing. You had to keep life going because you have two children. But that was a period of disillusionment where I was like, I don't understand who would do this and why. You know what I mean? There's no
Yes.
explanation.
Yes.
When you sacrifice so much to try to chase after this pipe dream.
Exactly. Yes, so much, your entire family. And to a lot of people, that is what life is all about, is your family and your loved ones and all of that. So that would be very difficult. And I can see how it would cause you to go into a spiral of depression and stuff too. So, okay,
Hmm.
so that marriage ended. And what happened next in your story?
So I mean, my story took a lot of turns. I got married again shortly after that for a brief period of time because I was so determined to keep a mom and dad and children. I didn't want to be a statistic.
Hmm.
So I was just so determined to have a mom and a dad and children. I didn't want to be a single mom,
Yeah.
especially being African American. I definitely didn't want to be that certificate. Here's
Yes.
another black woman with the children and the deadbeat dad. And so I did. I got married to a guy that was like, oh, he convinced me the same thing. You're right. You don't want to be a single mom. I'll marry you and take care of your children. But it ended up being a very domestic violence situation. So that was crazy and short lived. I was like, okay, this is not working.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see because you went from like this period of being abandoned essentially by your husband
Right,
and then going into a safe space that you thought and then
right.
it turning into domestic violence. And so how long were you in that marriage and like you said it was short.
It was short. I was only in that for about 3 years.
Okay. And what caused you to kind of just call it quits early? Like I shouldn't say early, but why were you like I'm not going to let this go on past 3 years?
Right. I didn't want. Definitely, I didn't. Well, he was actually trying to. I never knew when he was going to get violent. What I mean, and the violence, and so I never knew how far it was going to get. You know what I mean? Like it got
Yeah.
to a point where he almost tried to push my head through the floor.
Oh.
And this was all church people.
Oh.
These are all Christians. We all going to church together.
Yeah.
All of us went to church together, and then you talk to the minister, and they tell you that you should stay with your husband unless they are committing adultery. You should stay. And I was trying to stay because, well, he's not committing adultery. He's just slapping me or hitting me in
Yeah.
the face, or you know what I mean.
Yes. Yes.
And he couldn't understand why I couldn't just do whatever he said, and then when he wasn't around, just do whatever he was thinking. I'm thinking, because I don't know what you're thinking. When
Exactly.
it's just like it was ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And so he had his own demons that he was dealing with, which is why he was being very violent. And I'm trying to deal with him and his demons and my own issues. So
Right. Right. And raising children in a healthy
and raising
way.
two children in a healthy
Yes.
way, and that's not healthy for them to be involved in or to have to see or have to even live with.
Right.
Right. So I had to move on. I left within about 3 years.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it sounds like a really courageous and strong decision to do that. I mean, it was your second marriage, and you got into that marriage looking for stability for your children and family, and weren't finding that. And instead it felt more volatile, I'm sure. And like you said, you didn't have a lot of control over this situation, it sounds like. And so, yeah, it sounds like it was a very courageous decision to do that.
Yeah, there's no win in a decision to leave a marriage because the children are going to be affected and you're going to be affected. So it's just it's a lose. It's the best of the worst decisions.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You can stay and he can become more volatile, and then the children have to see that, and there's all kind of complications. Or you can leave, and then the children don't have a father figure in their home. Just like when my husband left, it was like, okay.
Yeah.
So there's no, it's not a good situation. It's going to be bad. And of course, now that I'm a single parent, I have to work, and I have to work. Sometimes I work 2 jobs. There was times when I worked 3 jobs. So that means that I'm not always at home.
Yep.
And making sure my children have a safe place to be or safe people to be with, but it's not me.
Yeah.
And so that's another issue within itself. You know what I mean? I usually try to work hours like when they're at school.
Yep.
Or, and try to be there at the football game, and then I might go from the football game, take the kids home, you're okay, and now I go to my evening job, that type of thing. So it was always things that where I probably missed out on some things, or I wasn't there to be there all the time. And the children still grow up and say stuff like, well, you weren't there, you missed this, or you missed that, or you weren't there for that. You know what I mean? So there's no winning in that, and you don't know exactly how your parenting is going to turn out until your children grow up and say, hey, you didn't do this.
Yes, right.
You didn't do that, you didn't do this, and you didn't do that. And your first response is, excuse me, I didn't do that because you wanted to eat every day, and I thought that'd probably be more important.
Yeah.
But you can't.
Right. You had to make the really tough choices.
You wanted to eat, you wanted to sleep, you wanted clothes. I thought that was probably more important. But you can't respond in that manner. You have to say, yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
Right. Right. Because to them, that was their lived experience, and that was probably the truth in that instance. But they don't have the full perspective and understanding of what it was like to be you in those moments, doing the absolute best that you could.
Right. Well, what you had to work with.
Right. Right. Exactly. With what you had to work with. Okay. So then what comes next?
So then I spent life, dating people, and just kind of, it was crazy. But as far as significant others, there was people that I would date. I remember dating crackheads, and I'd never taken drugs, so I didn't know the signs and symptoms of what somebody looked like when they're on drugs until I was in the middle of a relationship with somebody who's on drugs. I'm thinking, oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. So you had to go through that experience.
So I went through a lot of different experience when it comes to dating, but I always tried to make sure that I worked a lot so that my children could live in certain neighborhoods.
Yeah.
That would be safe. Because the one thing that I did realize from being a single Black parent is that I need to make sure my son and daughter are in neighborhoods that's going to be safe.
Yes.
Which costs more money.
Yep.
Right. So that means I had to work more because I didn't want to have to be on welfare or government assistance because that would put me in a neighborhood where now my children is going to be compromised. Their safety is going to be compromised because someone might try to talk my son into being in a gang, or somebody might do something to my daughter. So I had to make sure we were in neighborhoods that were safer.
Right.
And safer neighborhoods usually cost more money, and so that means I had to work more.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I went back to school, so I would go to school and work, and go to school and work, and take classes and work. And take classes and work. So I graduated from high school. It probably took me 20 years to finally get my first degree.
Wow. But you did it.
I did.
Yeah.
I did all the way up to PhD, right?
Yeah, that's just absolutely incredible. Getting your PhD and even your master's is a lot of hard work. But you're clearly not shy of hard work, because this whole story, it's talking about your hard work throughout all of it. Okay, so I know that you then got married a third time, and tell us about that marriage.
It is embarrassing to say that I have been married 4 times. I've been married 4 times. So my third marriage was also to a gentleman, and I thought he was like 15 years older than me. And so I figured it would be nice because I guess my life was in search of a stable household.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
guess I was running and chasing after this stable household. And for some reason, I thought it meant men, father, mother, children,
Yep.
man, woman, or something, two parents and a child and the children. And I kept running after the stability of having two parents and the children. And so I just figured I'd marry this older gentleman, and he would definitely offer stability, right, and wisdom. And the the older gentleman was actually a drug addict, and I didn't know he was addicted to drugs.
Oh.
He was addicted. And that was when I started having an experience with people who were addicted to drugs but were functioning.
Yes. Yes. Right.
You know what I mean? Because I figure if you go to work every day and you dress nice and you seem to, be able to hold a decent conversation, you didn't look like you were totally stoned out, then you probably weren't using drugs, or at
Right.
least not to the point of being addicted. And so then I found out, yeah, you can do all that and still be addicted to drugs.
Hmm.
And he was.
And I think it probably goes back to the fact, like you said, you didn't do drugs yourself. And so you didn't really understand that very well.
Right.
And so to be able to identify that in someone who's functioning at a high level would be difficult to pick out.
Right. And I didn't even come from a family that did, I came from a middle class family where I had my mom, my dad, me, and my brother. It was no divorce, no step parents, no blended parents, and everybody on my block had mom and dad and children. It was just pretty much. It was almost like I used to call it like a Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like a little neighborhood where people who had mom, dad, and children, right? But of course, those neighborhoods still have their own problems, but the problem is not usually divorce.
Hmm.
Who knows what's going on in somebody's household, but
Yes.
for the most part, at our house, it was me and my mother, father, and my brother. And it was just like, I didn't use drugs. We didn't drink. We had coffee. They had a cocktail with dinner. It was pretty much a simple life. So to go into the world and find out that there's a whole new, different type of world out there that I had not been exposed to limited my knowledge of what the world was like and the different things to look out for.
Right. Okay. And I know in our discussions previously, you explained to me that there was a point at which you looked back and you were like, why does this keep happening to me? And I end up in these relationships.
Hmm.
What was that moment you realized that? And like you were thinking about that? And like, what did you realize?
So the after my third marriage, I was married to a person who was an addict, and because he was an addict, he spent all my money. He cleaned out the bank account, everything, right? And he would do that on a regular basis until I could no longer afford to be with him. It was kind of like, okay, I keep making these crazy mistakes, and I sat down and talked to a minister, like, what is going on? Like why am I in these crazy marriages? And he actually said that the common denominator was me. He's like,
Mm,
whatever's going on is with me because I'm the one who, and I had to stop and take a look at myself and say, oh yeah, it is me. Whatever it is, that I'm the common denominator. There's something going on where I keep making these same decisions to be attracted to people who are not ready to be in a healthy relationship, or we're not at the same place
yes.
as far as relationship wise. So it's going to be a problem. And so that is part of when I decided that I probably need to go get some therapy and figure out what's really going on with me. And one of my exes had recommended that I go to therapy because they thought something was wrong with me.
Oh,
And they were
interesting.
right, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a tough pill to swallow, though, to be like, oh, wait, I am the common denominator here. And I mean, you are definitely not to blame for the actions of your ex-husbands, of course. But to realize that, hey, there's something here inside of me that I can change and hopefully change the trajectory of the choices I make moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did have to go to therapy and sit down and talk about, I mean, you go all the way back to what, from the influences of your childhood, what did you learn to believe? And there were some false beliefs that I had learned to believe from childhood. One of them was that everybody was good and and if they weren't, somehow I could change that. I could
Oh,
just be really nice and really sweet to you, and you would change. When that's not, you can't change anyone else.
yeah.
Absolutely, people can change, but another human being cannot change another human being. They have to do that themselves.
Yes.
And it's a process. First of all, they have to realize that they need to change. They have to realize that there's a change that needs to happen, and they have to realize that, well, I even have a desire to do so. Because even people who realize that there might be a change that needs to happen, they may not want to do it.
Right.
Right? So they would have to first realize that they need to change first, and accept the fact that it's something that they want to do, and whether they want to do it will depend on what the outcome is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a
Exactly.
lot of levels to changing who you are, because it's a very, very deliberate process. It's much easier just to say, well, that's how I am, that's how I've always been, that's who I was meant to be, and just accept who you are and keep going. That's only beautiful if it's not a problem.
Right.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? If you saying, hey, I use drugs, I like using drugs, and that's what I like to do, okay, but the problem is that it takes money, you don't have any. So now you gotta get money from somebody else or steal some money. Now it becomes a problem. Because now people don't like it when you steal their money. And so that's also, that means they're probably gonna call the police or try to beat you up or shoot you. You just never know what's gonna happen. So it becomes a problem. So you have to look at what you're doing, and even if it's just who you are, do you like the consequences of it?
Right.
If
Right.
you don't like the consequences of the person that you are, then you can change some things and the consequences will change.
Mm. Yes. You sound like you're a therapist. For anyone that doesn't know, Patricia is a therapist herself. And so, and I believe that it's because of your own experiences. Is that kind of what led you to
Absolutely.
go? Yes.
I am a therapist. And the reason why I became a therapist is probably from my own experiences. But I have to say, even when I was a little girl, I used to always analyze people's behavior and try to figure out the why behind what they did as opposed to just responding to what they're doing. Which is why, which is another reason why I found myself involved in relationships with people who probably weren't the best person for me, because I'm so busy trying to understand why they're doing it
Yep.
and help.
Yes.
And so what happens is I had to learn to separate that. I can understand why you're doing it. I can even talk to you about it, but I don't need to be married to you.
Right. Right. Exactly. I can still help you.
You don't need to be my boyfriend. And I could just step back and say, hey, I understand exactly, no judgment. I understand why you are the way you are, what led you to using drugs, what led you to wanting to be a drug dealer. I understand all of that. And I don't need to be living in the house with
Right.
it.
Right. And
So,
probably shouldn't be for your own good, which you
and probably
found
should
out.
not be, which
Yes.
is what I
Yes.
found out. I
Wow.
remember my first ex, the crazy one that sold drugs, was who he really brought some things to my attention too. He said, Patricia, your problem is that you want to save the world by marrying the world. You can't.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it sounds like you had this like strong desire built inside of you to really just like help people, but
I did.
you didn't have the understanding that you didn't have to give your whole self to them in order to help them.
Absolutely.
It was kind of almost like a martyr situation or something maybe where you
Yes,
were
it is.
really
It is almost like a martyr situation. And for some reason, there's a lot of us out there that feel like that is what God would expect of us, to be
yeah.
martyrs. You know, there's people that feel like, oh, anybody who needs a place, they should be able to come and stay at your house. No, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because there's things that come along with that. There's reasons for why they're in the position that they're in. And if you really want to help, you need to get to the core of what the reason is. And them coming to stay with you is not going to get to that. It's just
Right.
going to cause problems, probably more problems for
Yes.
you.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I love digging into this in this story with you because it really gives us a picture of like this better understanding of how someone can get into these situations, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when I think about the things you're saying, like I really see and believe that while you were the common denominator and you had things to work on yourself, they were kind of coming from a place of pure intentions. Like you had such good intentions. You wanted to help people and you got married again and then again because you wanted your children to have a stable family. And that's the type of family you came from. And you were just striving and trying so hard to make those things happen. And unfortunately, ended up in situations that made it really hard for you.
Right.
And so for people listening, I think it's just a wonderful way and example of understanding these types of situations and how hard it can really be and how hard you were working, the courage you had to try to make it all happen.
Right. And so the thing is that everybody, wants to say everyone deserves a second chance, and they do. But a second chance doesn't have to include you being involved in their life.
Mm,
Their second chance could be offering them a resource, pointing them in the right direction. You know what I mean? For them to
yes.
do what it takes to get themselves in a position so they'll be a better person
Yes.
for society, for their family, for the children, for the job, whatever the situation is.
Right, right. For them to become a better person so that they can succeed in their second
There
chance.
you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I do know that you're married in a loving relationship for how many
Yes.
years?
22 years.
All right.
Finally, right?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Tell us about your husband
Finally.
and all of that and where and your children. They're in California, right?
Yeah, finally I did. After taking a break, I took a break from like, okay, let me stop dating and just kind of figure out what's going on with me and why I keep attracting a certain energy or why I keep making certain decisions. So it just took a while, but I did finally meet a gentleman that had his wife had deceased. So he hadn't gone
Mm.
through all the crazy that I went through. He
Yeah.
was married once to the same person, so he offered stability. He
Yep.
was married to his wife until she died. So he came from the same type of background. That's important too. Although he came from a mom who was a single mom, but he did come from a stable background. So that's important to kind of I had learned to sit down and talk to people and and learn more about them when you're out trying to date and get to know people. I'd learned the right questions to ask, like, okay, so what
Yes.
do you do, and what's your family like, and actually start getting to know someone and spending time with them, and not just taking their word for it or whatever, watching them, that type
Yeah.
of thing.
Right. Right. Oh, that's wonderful. And you said 22 years. That's a really, really long time, too. So, congratulations. That's a big deal and very exciting. And so, I want to go into like switch a little bit into society and some of the issues we're dealing with in society because I think your background as a therapist in particular and then being a Black woman living in America, you can shed a lot of light on some of these issues that we've kind of been digging into, I should say, wrestling with in our country in recent years. So the first one is you mentioned to me that as a therapist, you've seen anxiety and depression increasing quite significantly in the last couple of years. And I'd like to know why. Why do you think we're seeing that?
So I think that the pandemic did cause things to come to the surface that were there and may be laying dormant or just kind of put on the back burner. Because they were not things that just didn't exist anymore. They were things that were always there. They were laying dormant. But it was like the perfect storm. You had a certain person that was in the position of president that had a mindset that was different than any other president. Let me take that back. He verbalized a mindset that was different because I'm sure there was other people that obviously thought the same way he did. Otherwise, how would he become the president, right? And how would
Yeah.
he become such a popular person? So what he was saying is what people obviously have been thinking, but somehow it had been laying dormant or in some type of position where it wasn't in the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you can put that with a global pandemic where everybody is on edge and now things have shut down. So the
Yes.
only thing that's left is the foundation and the basics of life.
Yes. And, I've read too that whenever there's a global crisis like that, or I think it even was said like something like a pandemic, you can expect civil unrest to break out. riots or people getting anxious, like because it's such a change in life and so much uncertainty. And I think you're right, because during that time period, we saw the insurrection at the Capitol, which I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
get too political here in this conversation, of course, but I think it's important to hear your perspective as a Black woman in America, because this podcast is all about that. And for listeners, we don't have to agree with everything that's said on these episodes, but I hope that you'll want to listen, because again, that's how we learn and be able to challenge our perspectives and come up with our own opinions and perspectives. So, Patricia, I want to ask you, when we talk about the insurrection at the Capitol, how did you feel in that moment when you were watching what was taking place?
When we think about the insurrection of the Capitol, I think it would be great if we could step back and let's look at it as if it's just human beings, right?
Yep.
We're not going to attach the color to it at first. So let's initially think about the insurrection of the Capitol and say there was a group of human beings that got so fired up or agitated or angry. Something was going on inside them for them to all leave their house, you know what I'm saying? Get on planes and cars and gather together in one location. That's a lot of people that have come from a lot of different directions. And so it was hard for that not to go unnoticed.
Yes.
Somewhere all along the way, the airport was more busier than usual, had to have been, and all these people. And so at some point, by the time they got to be at least down the street from the Capitol, that's a lot of people gathering together. And somebody had to talk to them about it, because how would they know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was some conversations had, there was something had where there was a people that had an agreement that we're all angry enough or
Yes.
fired up enough or something enough for us to agree that we're going to get together and we're going to walk down the street, and then we're going to attack the building that's supposed to be the foundation and core of what this country was built on. It's supposed to be the place. And I went to the Capitol before. I couldn't even bring in my cell phone. I had to hide, because I didn't know that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when I took a tour of the Capitol, I had to hide my cell phone in my purse somewhere behind this trash can. Hope it was going to be there when I get back, because they would not allow me to bring it in. That's how strict this place is, right?
Right.
And so we're going to go to a place that's that strict with what you can and can't do, and get a group of thousands of people come and actually start busting the door down, climbing up the wall, because I guess the steps were too crowded to get up.
Mm.
But we want to get in so bad that we're not going to wait till the steps clear. We're going to climb up the wall
Yeah.
and climb over and so we can get into this building. That's a lot of feelings.
Yes.
And I'm assuming negative feelings, because people that are happy don't normally act like that, right?
Yeah.
So we can
Yeah.
assume
Yes.
that these
Yes.
people were feeling negative stuff, anger, pissed off, frustrated. Maybe you're going to have some people that's doing this for the fun of it, right? But for the most part, it was a group of people, and they were all in there. So that's what I saw. I'm like, there's a group of angry people. So whatever cause they're fighting for, they really believe in this.
Yes. I love that perspective that you're bringing, and it's very much a therapist perspective, I think, because you're digging into what are these people thinking and why are they acting this way, and seeing them as human beings. So I think that's a really great way to think about it. So go ahead.
And then that is my first perspective when I see this happening, that there's something, they're really upset. It's almost like I wish I could just give them some big old arms, grab them all, and just give them a big hug and say, it's okay. I don't know what you're upset about. I mean, I know what they're upset about, but even if I didn't, it would be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Come on, it's whatever it is. Oh my God, you need a big hug because you're just so upset and angry. You know what I mean? So that's how it was. So that's the first thought. Like, wow, these people are really angry
Yes.
about something, to the point where they feel like an injustice has been done, even though the rest of the world can't seem to see the injustice, because the people inside the building are doing what they think is right. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. They're voting and they're
Right.
making a decision and they're saying, okay, this is what happened. The vote is happening. We're going to make a change of power. And it went something that they do every time the power switches over. But for
Yes.
some reason, they were convinced that this was such a wrongdoing that they were willing to actually tear this Capitol up to
Mm.
get to this injustice and had a noose out. They were going to hang people. I mean, it's serious. We're getting
Yes.
serious here, right?
Yes. Yes.
And this, what's confusing about it is like, so where is the miscommunication? Where you got the people inside believing that this is something that needs to be done, and the people outside saying that we don't. So that means there's some type of miscommunication that must have happened for this to be
Yes.
going on. And that's the core of it. Where's the miscommunication and what happened? Why is there miscommunication and what's going on? And that is the number one problem. One of the number one problems in this country is there's a miscommunication going on.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay. And shortly after, I mean, just at the same time as this was happening, we also found ourselves kind of in the midst of another conversation, which was about racism and what the actions that were taking place at the Capitol, what that represented to Black Americans. So, as a Black woman in America, can you give us your perspective and understanding and how that moment made you feel?
Right. So what I want people, if anyone ever hears this, I want you to be able to be honest with yourself and actually picture how you would feel. And just be honest. How would you feel, or what would it look like to you or feel like to you if all these people were Black? That just saying that, if anybody would be honest, they automatically know how they would feel. It would be a whole different feeling, and it would be a whole different response.
Hmm.
If thousands of Black people got together, if they could make it out of the airport, which probably not, because it would be concerning for people to see that many Black people congregating
Yes.
to DC, right?
Hmm.
To Washington, DC. We're not talking about to Chicago, South Side. We're talking about a bunch of Black people getting together loudly. And you know, us being loud is already uncomfortable for people, right? So
Yeah.
we're getting together loudly, and we have some Black person at a microphone saying, we're going down to the White House. This is what we're going to do. And it's a group of Black people with sticks and nooses
Yeah. Right.
going toward the Capitol. That group of Black people would not have made it a block
You're right. You are right.
without the National Guard being called in. Airplanes would be flying in. It would be
Yes. Yes. Right.
people from ships coming across. It would just be
You're painting a very chaotic picture for us that you're right. You are right.
and they would start shooting us down as if we were a bunch of roaches, which is what we are.
Hmm.
They would start shooting us down as if we was roaches. They got to be stopped. They got to be stopped. We would have to be stopped, and everybody, and I have to say, it's no doubt in my mind that people can see how that would be possible, because we would look so dangerous and so threatening, and so just because
Yes.
we're brown people, because really, what threat have we ever been? You know, we were brought over here. So it's kind of like you take a bunch of people, you bring them to your house, and then you say you're a threat. You brought me
Yeah.
in your house. I was
Yeah.
minding my own business.
Right. Right.
You're gonna
Right.
bring me over here, beat me down, and then say I'm a threat to you. Really? And that's really much the foundation of how Black people are. It's always like, as a race, we don't have the power that of this country because we're not the power structure of this country, but we seem to be the biggest threat. And we
Mm-hmm.
don't have the most guns. We don't have the most positions of authority. We don't have the most money. So how are we the biggest threat? And you shoot us down as if we are the biggest threat.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, your perspective. And I'm sure, again, not everyone agrees, but I definitely can put myself in that moment and think about it. And I understand what you're saying. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't a big group of Black people that were doing this. And the fact that they made it to the Capitol, they made it inside the Capitol, is what was so hurtful to the Black community, right? Because if it had been
That's one of the
them,
things that was really hurtful. It was hurtful
yeah,
just in general as human beings watching it. It was hurtful to know that people would attack the Capitol, which is supposed to be, the source of our democracy, right? That was hurtful. Was really hurtful is it just once again showed that, man, they can, people have the right to do things that we don't have the right to do.
yeah.
Right. As Black people, it was another example of people having the right to do things that Black people don't have the right to do.
Yes. And some people listening might not understand that, but I think it's probably because we haven't had to live in the shoes of you.
Right.
And I believe that you are saying that, and I wholeheartedly believe that because you are saying that and that's your perspective, that's the truth.
Well, it is definitely, it definitely it is how it is how it appears for sure.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. That's a better way to say it, for sure.
Hmm.
Okay, so now we've touched on that a little bit, and just I think it's important, like it is a political discussion. It's really a charged discussion, but I think it's really important to be able to get to understanding your perspective and how moments like that make you feel and what it's like to live in this country where you feel like you don't have the same rights, yet you should. So I want to ask, just if you have any other examples or stories in your life to illustrate again this topic of racism and like how you felt about our country and your place in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the examples are all, are always when you have my son, of course, is a Black child, and he's a pretty big dude, and he's handsome, dark skinned Black guy, but so he's always being stopped just because.
Mm,
And the only thing that I can say is a couple of things that maybe he's been blessed that he hasn't had any confrontations that led to him being shot or beaten because he's learned how to be polite, but that doesn't always work either.
yeah.
Sometimes you can be polite and respectful and just do what you're told, and you still might get harassed.
Mm,
But for sure, he gets just stopping him. There's been times when he has been the passenger and the person driving would stop and they pulled him out of the car and asked him his driver's license, his information. He's like, I'm the passenger. I have to have a driver's license? I'm just sitting in the passenger seat.
right.
Right. And so that happens to him. There's been times when he was working as a security guard, a plainclothes security guard in a store. And so he's kind of walking around the store, just kind of minding his own business, keeping an eye on things. And they call security. And so he comes to the scene to find out that they're calling security on him, right?
What?
He is a security guard. So there's a white
Right.
person that goes up to the front and saying, this Black guy walking around the store. And I think he's up to no good.
Oh
And
my
and they call
goodness.
security. And then he shows up because he's security. And the woman's like, right.
I
Yeah,
called security.
right.
Oh my goodness.
I
That
didn't call
is
you. I called security. He's like, I am security.
wow. Now that is a really clear example. I don't think it could get any clearer. Like how sad, but also funny in a way because it's like it really shows like how our perceptions can be so wrong and so skewed.
Right.
And it's hurtful. I'm sure. I mean, I'm
It is
sure
hurtful.
he's walked through this enough to kind of let it roll off his shoulders, I'm guessing, but it's hurtful.
At the core of it, it is hurtful. Unfortunately, as Black people, we have learned how to maybe laugh about it or joke about it or take it in stride because it's our life. It's the life that we were born into. It's not even like it used to be better. No, it's the
Yeah.
life that we're born into. Did it used to be different? It used to be different, but I don't think it was better. I
Right.
don't think it's better now. I think it's just different now. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
It's
Yeah.
probably more covert than overt. So that means that I don't see it coming now. Whereas before, there was a fine line. It was, a real serious line drawn. You Blacks on this side, whites on that side. I'm not sure that's better, but that's just different.
Yeah.
Whereas now, that line is gone, the feelings are still there because the line is in your heart. It's not in the neighborhood.
That's good. That's really
So
good.
we can desegregate and we can put everybody together, but that doesn't mean desegregation is going on in your feelings and your beliefs. And that's where it needs to go on. And if that hasn't happened, the line is still drawn. And you
Right.
just come up with a better way to mask it.
Yes. Yeah. What you're saying is if there's this racism or a line of segregation drawn in your heart, we can't transform what happens in our society and we
Right.
can't move the issue forward. And so it's really a heart issue that begins inside of each of us. And so I would challenge all of us to really take that to heart without too many puns involved here, but to really chew on this conversation and your perspective, Patricia,
Right.
because I think, I mean, it's a vulnerable place too to share your own story and your own heart and your own experiences and your thoughts. And so I really thank you for doing that because I think it's a really beautiful thing when someone gets to the point of being comfortable doing that for the benefit of all of us and the benefit of the
Right.
rest of humanity. So I thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you if someone does want to continue transforming their heart and dig up racism inside of them, what would you suggest to that person, either to help them personally do that or to help work towards dismantling it in society?
I think the two things that you can do for sure is be honest with yourself. And that is no matter what race you are, black, brown, white, yellow, Asian, Latinx, be honest with yourself and realize, what do I hold in my heart against a certain person because of their race?
Yeah.
And just be honest and don't say, no, I don't really feel that way. Just be honest and say, okay, and so that means I have deliberately try not to hold that against anyone.
Yeah.
Realize that I do notice it and it does affect me, and then try not to hold it against someone. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's
And
really good.
right. And so, and also on a global level or more, you could actually see, when you see it, say something. When you see something happen, just say something. For example, if you know you just went through the a cashier line and you were writing a check, even though people don't write checks anymore, and the cashier asked you for your ID, and it was a black woman, and when they came to you and you're white and they didn't ask you, just say, hey, why didn't you ask me for my ID? I noticed that you
Yeah.
asked that black woman for hers. Just say something. Just little things like that.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a great idea because it's not rude to ask that. You're just curious, but
Right.
it also causes them to stop and say, "I don't know." Or maybe they had a
Right.
really good reason. Maybe there was a
Maybe it had
bottle
a
of
good
alcohol
reason.
and you didn't see it, or who
Exactly.
knows? But
Exactly.
it
Exactly.
could stop that person to be like, I need to think about that.
Exactly. And when you're standing next to someone, my daughter, she was wearing her hair in her natural afro, beautiful, right? And she walked past these two white women. And one white woman said to the other white woman, I wonder why they wear their hair like that. Don't they know that that's aggressive?
Aggressive.
Right? And I'm thinking, how can the hair, the way it naturally grows out of your head, be aggressive? That's how I think of it. But I understand what she means is we find that threatening because the stereotypes that we know of is the people with the afros, Black Panthers, power to the people. That's what they
Yeah.
think of when they see an afro,
Right, right.
or that's what they're thinking of. Okay, so and there's two women. It would be nice if one of the women had said, well, it's just her hair. It's not really aggressive. Say that to your friend.
Yes.
You know what I mean? When you walk next to them. Well, that's if you, of course, you probably agree with your friend. You're right, it's aggressive. Or maybe you can say it to yourself and stop and think, is that really aggressive? That her
Mhm.
hair, the way she wears it naturally automatically makes her aggressive or threatening or one of those angry black women because she wears her hair. And that's another thing. Before you call someone an angry black person, just think about, is what they're saying deserve anger?
Hmm.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
If
I
you
mean,
just, if I walked into your store and you obviously treated me differently by ignoring me, I'm standing there, and you let other people go in front of me that were white, and you didn't speak to me until after everyone. And now I say something, I'm,
Yeah.
Am I angry because I say, excuse me, but I was standing here? I can't even, a lot of times, if I even say something as simple as, excuse me, I was standing here, did you see me? I sound angry. So I have to stand there and think, I'm not sure how I can say this without you thinking I'm angry.
Yeah. And I mean, on one hand, like you actually do have the right to feel angry in those situations. Like I
Right.
can
And I
see
have the
how,
right to feel angry.
right, right,
Exactly.
right. But they're not having the awareness to understand, like the situational awareness of what is actually happening here. And that's, I
Exactly.
think that's the root of what we're getting at. The issue here is not having that awareness. And you do have the right to be angry. And yet you feel as though it's hard to stand up for yourself in those situations when you should be able to.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should be able to be angry without you telling me I'm angry for no reason, making it seem like I'm being aggressive or.
Yeah, right. Okay, so now the opposite. I want to ask the opposite. What would you say to someone who says they don't see racism in our country?
So for someone that says they don't see racism, we would have to be clear on maybe some reasons for why. Because to me, the only way that you can say you don't see it is if you really never saw it, which means that you grew up in a neighborhood of everyone who looked very homogenous. Everyone looked like you. The store, everyone looked like you. You went to school, everyone looked like you. And then your TV shows, since you can choose what you watch, are just people who look like you and act like you. So you're right, you don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I agree that you don't see it, but it does exist. And
Right.
that's the problem. The problem is that even though you don't see it, it still exists. And it's a problem. And then when you do start seeing things, you're confused because you're thinking, wow, I didn't know people could act that way, or I didn't know they would do that. And for sure, there's the same people that are in your neighborhood that are nice and friendly, and you thinking they would never do anything to anyone, no matter what color they want. You don't know that until the black person across the street moves in, and then you get to see
Yeah.
who really would accept it and who wouldn't.
And again, probably if they're not accepting it, they might be doing it unintentionally, not realizing that it's actually there in their heart. Again, because they're not recognizing it. And it goes back to that point that you said, being honest with yourself. And I always say, too, that the power of story is so powerful because the fact that we're one person, we can't possibly experience everything in our own life. And thank goodness we don't, or it would be a ton of hardship, right? But if we haven't experienced it, the next best way to experience it is through someone's story. And so it's
Right.
stories like this, Patricia, where you're opening up your heart and being transparent to help us be able to see and understand through someone else's perspective and
Mhm.
experience. So I hope this has been an enlightening episode. It's certainly been for me. Your story is very powerful and just incredible to have the opportunity to be able to partner with you in sharing it. So thank you, Patricia. It has been such a lovely conversation, a difficult one, but a very worthwhile and lovely conversation.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate that you have an interest in wanting to know. That warms my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely, I wouldn't want to hear it from anyone else first, but from you, right? So you're just, again, so wise. And now people have gotten to see that wisdom come through. So thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Are you thinking about possibly sharing your own story one day? You can snag my first time storytelling checklist to share your own story with confidence and no regrets. This checklist walks you through a list of questions you should consider when deciding whether you're ready to tell your story for the first time. You can snag my first time storytelling checklist to share your own story with confidence and no regrets on my website at stephaniemjacobs.com/resources. Well, now do you see why I love Patricia's wisdom so much? She has lived through so much hardship and yet has been able to take those difficult experiences and share the wisdom she's gained through her therapy practice with clients. She's using her gifts and experiences to serve those around her in a time where many need services more than ever. Not only that, but wow, the stories and examples she shared to help us understand her perspective as a woman living in America was so powerful. I love what she said about that if there's a line of segregation drawn in our hearts, we can't transform what happens in our society, and we can't move the issue forward. It's a heart issue that begins inside of each of us. I think it's such a powerful reflection, and I challenge you to take up Patricia's call to be honest with yourself and reflect on what's present in your heart. I know I certainly am. And one thing I'd like to clarify from this conversation, at one point in the episode, I said that because it's Patricia's perspective, it's the truth. And she corrected me saying, that's how it appears, which I'm so glad she did. The fact about perspectives is that our perspectives aren't necessarily the truth. They're how things appear to us from our own lived experiences, which is so important to remember. Our perspectives are just that, a perspective. And if we're willing to listen and consider other perspectives, we might just start seeing something new. It's an ever-evolving process. So that's a wrap on this episode. I'm so thankful for Patricia's vulnerability in sharing examples from her own life to help us better understand relevant events and different racial perspectives. It was a true gift to have her on the show today, and I hope you've learned a few things to add to your own worldview too. Did this episode touch your heart? If you loved today's story and have a relatable experience to share, encouraging words for our guests, or just want to share a comment, go to the show notes for this episode and send us what we like to call heart mail for a chance to have your note featured on an upcoming episode. If there's a large response to any particular story, we might just bring that guest back on the show to dive into your comments, or even have them join us as a guest in the Love Light Stories Facebook community. It's as easy as sending us a voice message or written note, both easily accessible in today's show notes. Simply go to stephaniemjacobs.com and click on the Stories tab. So, give it a try. Send us your heart mail. I just can't wait to hear what's on your heart. And hey, thank you so much for listening to this podcast and leaning into today's story. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't ever miss an episode. And a great way you can support these conversations is to rate the show and leave a review. And if you have a friend who would like these stories, share it with them too. All of these things are the best way you can support this podcast. So thank you. And until next time, lovelies, keep radiating that love and light to everyone you meet.